Can you fly this plane and land it?
Surely you can't be serious.
I am serious. And don't call me Shirley.
I flew single-engine fighters in the Air Force, but this plane has 4 engines. It's an entirely different kind of flying, altogether.
It's an entirely different kind of flying.
Because I'm very much a skeptic. I'm more of a skeptic than I am an atheist. I mean, atheist is a conclusion based on my skepticism.
You'll have to come like a little child to the foot of the cross.
That attitude is what is responsible for the rise of atheism.
That's not what Islam is all about. Islam is peace.
What is the penalty for leaving the Muslim faith?
With the death penalty.
Thank you.
This is Apostasy Now.
For people to get the information correct before they start yapping.
Get ready to root for the bad guys.
Begins with E, evidence. All the evidence.
This is Mr. Dragonbeard. I'm sitting here with Smashloc for the first time.
Welcome.
But we have no idea what we're going to talk about today.
No, this is going to be kind of off the cuff because this is my first episode. So, hooray for me. You're all privileged to listen to the voice of Smashloc. You take the lead there, Mr. Dragonbeard.
All right. So, I think I'm quickly establishing with anyone who listens to me online what my grudges are, what my focuses are. I'm essentially trying to get people to break the mold of their way of thinking. You know, politics, religion, anything where someone's stagnant in their way of thinking, it irritates me and I provoke them. I'm a troublemaker.
Well, there's nothing wrong with being a troublemaker. I mean, some of the greatest changes in history have been made by troublemakers.
Also some of the greatest disasters.
Well, no. Usually some of the greatest disasters, at least from what I've read, tend to be from established organizations or governments or religions. Sure, every once in a while you have the person that breaks the mold and kind of comes out of the woodwork out of nowhere and catches the whole world off guard or catches an entire nation off guard or whatnot. But generally speaking, most disasters come from the establishment.
Yeah, people who are inflexible.
Yeah. When you can't change your thinking for any reason, then no reason can be brought to you that will have you change your ways when disaster is impending.
Right. They start out with their assumption, and they're inflexible.
Oh, yeah.
perpetuates the ignorance.
Well, it's like a shield of stupidity. It's like a warm blanket, right? As long as you don't have to change your opinions, then you feel safe that your opinions are unassailable.
That's right.
There's an inability for people to want to change. See, for me, personally, in my own life, any time I have the opportunity to correct a view that is wrong, I look at that as a great opportunity. I don't fear it. I embrace it. And more people should. But it almost seems like the majority of people that I come into contact with, if you challenge their established belief structure, whether it's a religious or political ideology, they fight you on it because they don't know any other way and they refuse to try any other way.
Well, for you, what was the religious influence in your life? I don't think I've ever asked you that.
Star Trek? I don't know. My parents weren't overly religious. My grandparents are a little bit, but I think you go back 2 generations for most people and you'll find some religion in their family that, you know, they cling to a bit more than... My parents were pretty relaxed about it. Like, I mean, I believed, but I was never driven to believe. I was never forced to believe. It's really only since I've gotten older that my lack of a belief has become problematic because, like, my mother, for example, is like, oh, that's just a phase, you know, and I'm like, this isn't like a fad with like, you know, me changing my style of clothing, Mom. Like, I'm literally, I'm a grown man. I got kids, I got my own wife, my own house, my own problems, and I don't have time to worry about fantasy land.
Children, they go through phases.
They go through phases. Well, she literally told that to my uncle. He came down for a visit, and we were out in the backyard, we're having a beer, and he started asking me about all this stuff, because I hadn't seen him in like 15 years. And you actually asked me about, my religious views, and I said, I don't have any. Like, I agree that religion exists. I just wish it didn't. But if you present them with a list of things that are counters to every point that they're trying to use against you in a discussion, and then they just smile at you with this vacant look on their face, and they're like, oh yeah, oh yes, everything you're telling me is true, but my truth is just the same as your truth.
Yeah. From what you're describing, that vacancy, that is sort of, it's a conditioning. There's a conditioning that happens as a person who was fundamentalist. It's difficult to explain how it works, but anyone can be conditioned. I was, you can use other things as an analogy. Have you ever met someone, for instance, who's an extreme feminist?
Mm.
And really, they're saying things, and you're trying to discuss things with them about it, and they see you as being, aggressive when you're trying to just talk about it, because they assume those things are true, and they can't understand why you don't assume they are also true. So it's a larger framework. Once you've been conditioned to think a certain way, all those components are necessary. Once you start moving them around and actually open them up to thinking about them, then you're threatening the whole thing. That's where I think the vacancy comes from that you're talking about, is they have all their components in place. They have all of their answers that they're going to need. So why wouldn't they have a vacant smile on their face? The only person in need of answers is you.
Well, that's true, but then there's the opposite effect. Instead of this vacant look where they're just smiling at you like you're the one who's stumbling around in the dark looking for the light switch. Kind of goes back to what I said earlier about people who are aggressively defensive of their preconceived notions. So like when you use feminism, for an example, I can easily use, like, for instance, vegans. I know a few vegans, and oh my God, if you want to point out a people who, no matter how much you will point out the pros and cons of eating meat or dairy products or this or that, they are just, you cannot reason with them. Under any circumstances, they have their notion. This is what they're going to defend tooth and nail until they're blue in the face. And it doesn't matter what you tell them. They're going to defend it irrespective of the evidence you present.
Yeah. That's where, for me, I tie it all into the word ideology. Religion is the forefront of it. It is the king ideology, if you will. It's done, I think, the most damage. It affects the most people directly. But any kind of, like I say, anything where you go from having an idea or some ideas and you put it into an inflexible shape that's supposed to govern your worldview, I think that's where you're going to get the problems.
I find that a lot of people who were once religious have to have a substitute ideology. It's almost like being skeptical or the ability to just question everything, to some extent, is foreign to us as a species. We require, well, I don't know that we literally require, but it seems that people require, in a lot of times, something to cling to believe in, that shapes their view of the world. Because if they don't have this notion, if they don't have this framework, then they feel like they're floundering. So, for instance, I know my father, great man, wonderful thinker, can philosophize with me until dawn if he's got the proper amount of alcohol in his system. and yet he loves this TV show, Ancient Aliens. And he believes this shit, and it drives me nuts. And I know he knows it drives me nuts, and he will tell me that this stuff is true. Now, I know half the time he's joking with me, but there are just every so often you get into that discussion where 90% of what he's saying, he's just saying to you to try and get a rise, but there's that small percentage where he goes, you are just so inflexible. You refuse to see that this could be possible.
Not open-minded.
Yeah, not open-minded. And I keep telling him that rejecting nonsense is not a sign of a closed mind.
Right.
And that's one thing that I think a lot of religious, ideological individuals, whether it's religious ideology, political ideology, social ideology, conspiracy ideology, if that's even a thing, have to understand is that rejecting nonsense
I think that the conspiracy part might be a pathology.
Probably. I would agree that it would be a pathology, but I think this is how these things get started. This is how religions get started. This is how political movements get started, is that you get enough people to believe the way you do, and it creates a movement. I don't think that's the ideal way to do it, but it's the way that we've been doing it for all of human history that, is recorded anyway, that people band together with a like cause or a like mind, and then they change the course of history.
Yeah, I agree. I was saying it to someone recently that I think to Reap on my interview, that you get one person saying that, hey, there's this dude, he walked on water, and this dude, he brought people back from the dead. And that one dude you look at and you go, you're crazy. I don't think we can talk to you anymore until you start telling these weird stories. You get 1 million people saying it, though. Then it's not crazy anymore.
I don't follow that. Like, I mean, if 100 people told me I was wrong about something, I would probably, as an individual, start to question my own view of whatever it is that was being discussed. But if I'm certain that I'm correct, I can see I can see the reverse of it. I can see if you are certain of how you view a particular notion, that you will defend it regardless as to how many people tell you that it's incorrect. So in that respect, I understand where the religious or just the generally ideological person comes from. They feel, for the most part in their core, that this is correct, and no matter how many people tell me it's not, I will not be dissuaded from this view.
Your difference, though, is you're skeptical, right? So you base things on evidence. Your certainty comes, if you want to call it certainty, when you feel firm about instead of the word belief as a skeptic, I try to use a different terminology, because
acceptance.
Yeah, like confidence. Yeah, your confidence in something that you're perceiving as true or solid comes from, you're looking through the information, you're hearing how people came to the results, and evidence is a universal currency that we can exchange with one another. Mm-hmm. So if you have an idea and you're really certain of it, and a bunch of people say you're crazy, it's not going to bother you until that one person comes up one day and says, actually, there's some new evidence that you might not know. You look at it, it's qualified, properly done research, very solid, and then you go, well, let's reconsider this. Right?
Well, yeah, I generally, with some of my other friends when we're discussing, when they ask me what type of person I am, I tend to say I'm an evidentialist, which causes some scorn and laughs, because some of my friends are a little bit more loose in their discussion format. Like, they don't define their terms before discussion. Right. And then, I'm a little bit more rigid that way, right? So I like to make sure that we're all talking about the same thing before we carry on with the discussion. Yeah. But generally speaking, me as a person, I feel that religion is poisonous. But I also think that political ideology is poisonous. I think that ideology in general is a good motivator for people. If a person or a leader of a movement is inspiring, it's hard for it not to become ideological on some level. Yeah. And ideology itself is not bad. It's the application of the people in power, or the people who empower those that become the leaders, that make ideology bad. And once your ideology becomes so rigid and inflexible that it becomes an established shape or form or mode of thinking, if it cannot introduce new ideas, if it can no longer accept discourse, then it has become a rigid ideology that is more damaging than helpful.
Exactly, yeah. I agree completely.
Resistance is futile. Your life, as it has been, is over.
And, this is, I think for me, this is where I moved. When I came away from the organized religion, like I say, I had all these comfort zones and these things I had to believe. And when I started, out of good conscience, I decided, these things should be able to stand up to scrutiny. Mm-hmm. So I decided to start testing them. And I went through a very painful phase as they slowly started falling away. So then there was a vacancy. So there's like this euphoria at some point that hits you that goes, anything could be true. Those old things I had are gone, but you stop mourning them after a while and you go, well, now anything could be true because you don't have a criteria in place, most of us, when we come out of that background, you don't instantly have a criteria in place for how to reestablish.
Mm-hmm.
The old criteria was someone told it to you, and you believed them.
Yeah.
So this is, I believe, where conspiracy theory comes in. Large. Is because these people tell you these exciting things. Like, this is exciting. There was ancient civilizations here a million years ago, and now they're coming back as aliens, and they're shapeshifters. And we have to fight the battle against them.
The Anunnaki.
And the skeptic comes along and goes, no, that's true. All the stuff that you've learned in your boring school books, that's it. And so who do people want to believe here? So they're not going to, I moved away from religion. Now I'm hearing all these different ideas. And there's a few years where I really indulge in them.
I think it's natural, though. I think it's just a natural reestablishment.
Let me say, I did not believe the shape-shifting aliens.
I
never went that far.
I didn't go that far either. There was a point in time where intelligent design was convincing to me, and then I turned 13. But that being said, with conspiracy theories and with political ideologies, with religious ideologies, with any new mode of thinking that is introduced to a person who is coming out of one of these, they need to substitute something else. I don't think they should have to. I think that everyone should, it would be ideal if they could leave a rigid form of thinking and become skeptical of everything, and then learn the method of critical thinking. Because your world doesn't become less amazing because you look at it critically, because you seek evidence. I think in many ways it can become more enriching if you do.
Yeah, I think there's an overwhelming element. I remember when I would hear about these stories. Okay, so Coast to Coast AM. I don't know if you've ever listened to it. It is a hub on late night for every person who feels alienated in the world, is sitting at home at night, even on holidays, and mentally ill people all listen to this show. It has all of these people come on there. And there are no scruples. These people will put on anyone who's selling books or any kind of product. And, as a truck driver, I would listen to this stuff.
I'm sorry.
What's that?
I'm sorry.
But I would listen to laugh, right? Like I say, I was open-minded, but, so some of the stuff would come on, and at first, for instance, and this is the damage it does, the people would come on and say vaccinations are causing autism. And they would say all this scientific-sounding stuff. Now, if you want, as a skeptic now, I realize, there are ways to reach out, and there are tools you can develop, mental tools and social tools, to, sort through these types of questions. Don't just ask the question and never look. You can find the information. There are people out there trying to provide it. But when you're listening to the program, they make it sound pretty convincing to a layman's ears. And, it's not just the vaccinations, mystical concepts. They start talking about some pseudoscience that's involved in that. So there's different degrees, different ranges of what can sound believable to the general audience. There are people who are deep into the conspiracy, and there are people who are on the surface. So what I think was the most important thing was when I connected to this concept of skepticism, these people started to teach me how to look through the information, how to sift through it. And
check your sources.
Yeah. And what kind of sources are you even using in the first place? Like Coast to Coast AM? Pretty much, I don't want to say everyone that goes on the show is no good, but pretty much everyone's there to sell you something. Sell you fear, sell you products, sell you sales to their magazine.
Your terrorist gas masks, your bomb shelters, and your miracle manna bread from Peter Popoff.
Yeah, and then at some point when I started getting into skepticism, I started getting angry. I was getting angry listening to this stuff because I know they're preying mostly on people who are sitting at home, talking to their cat, who are afraid no one in the world cares about them.
Well, I mean, how different is that than any other political or social ideology? Like, I mean, if you look at it, these people are so blatantly out there with their scam artistry that you got to know that the people that they're scamming are probably already being tithed to death and donating to both political parties because they think they're actually going to change their life.
Yeah, desperately hoping.
Yeah. And that's what it is. And that's the part of it that I find sad, is that the part of the human condition that is being exploited is our want to be special individually, and our want for there to be more to the universe than just this life and then it's done.
Yeah.
And so, if you're coming out of religion, I think that it's a natural progression to claim to conspiracies or to some other form of alien hypothesis, some other special origin that makes life more interesting than just, I'm born, I'm part of this species that's been around this long, will probably last this long, and then we'll die, and the universe will never even give us a second thought after we're gone.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I think that's a huge part of it. Coming to terms with that kind of stuff. Whereas when I was, into my 20s, I was certain that I had a destiny, that I was special, I had a destiny. That's why I was probably so arrogant. I'm not arrogant at all anymore.
Right.
Sure. But, feeling you have a sense of destiny gives you a lot of forward momentum and a lot less fear. It helps you overcome a lot of fears. Even though I do believe people have a destiny, but in the sense that it's what you make it. You are who you are, and what matters is how you choose, what you choose to make of your life.
People suffer from confirmation bias, like, every day.
Yeah.
I see it actively in almost every conversation. Even if I'm just sitting back and I'm watching something happen, I've literally seen somebody pick up like a $20 bill off the ground, and God put that there for them in their mind. They're like, wow, I'm just so lucky.
Yeah.
Like, somebody is looking out for me today. I needed $20 and I found $20 and look at that.
That's an interesting way that you put that, because when I was in university, I was broke because I was bad with money.
Yeah.
And so one day I was walking away from the university towards home, and near the university was a church. There was one street light that was in front of it, and as I walked underneath, under that spotlight was a $20 bill sitting on the ground in front of a church.
Oh, weird.
Yeah. So you want to talk about a setup for confirmation bias. Like, everything was in place to go. At that point, I wasn't even really a Christian anymore, and I was still like, wow.
Thank you, Jesus.
Wow. I could have given it back to the church, but I figured that they probably don't need it as much as me.
Yeah, no doubt. But, me personally, I think that religion and politics are almost interchangeable anymore. Maybe not in Canadian culture, but then again, there's this whole, our city council still doing the Lord's Prayer.
Yeah.
Before they before they conduct their city business. See, me personally, I don't have any issue with them all going to a church. If they all go to the same church or whatever, it doesn't matter to me. If they do their prayer in their office before they start the city business, I don't care.
They put on their robes.
Yeah.
They walk around counterclockwise, chanting.
Yeah. Before the stone cutters start their business, they should probably do their prayers off camera, away from the city hall.
That's right.
But they literally start every meeting by doing the Lord's Prayer. And I mean, they represent this town, and this town is a diverse town for such a small town.
Yeah.
And there are not just Christians here. There are Muslims, there are Hindus, etc., so on and so forth. There are a couple tree-hugging pagans, and,
There's a couple.
I know one.
Yeah. Well, I didn't, when I was going to high school for years, I didn't realize a lot of things about my friends, because I was a hardcore Christian.
Hmm.
And they just didn't want to bother telling me because they didn't want to hear about whatever I thought. When I came back from university and I had become what many call a John Lennon Christian, like a hippie and a Christian mix, these people were telling me that there were some of them were pagans. I know a few of them were pagans. A lot of different things, not all of them were straight. They hadn't bothered to tell me that. And I realized these are things about people that make them who they are. And I didn't know my own friends for all those years. If I had not come back after I was done school or gone somewhere else, I wouldn't have ever known these things about these people I had been in school with for years.
Yeah.
That's what intolerance costs the person who's intolerant. You don't get to know the people around you the way you think you do.
Which makes it even harder when you're basically being reintroduced to them for the first time.
Yeah.
you as an individual growing. I know I didn't grow up with you, but we were kind of introduced in our late teens, early 20s. You suffered from like an excessive amount of aggression, and it made it very, very, very difficult for most people to kind of be open with you about certain ideas because you had your notions and you defended them quite vocally. And I think that I was one of the first and only people amongst our party of friends who was equally as mouthy.
Yeah.
When,
yes, we would want to.
We tossed a lot of sparks early on.
Yeah, well, probably. That's the way I meet most of my really good friends, is that one of the first, well, not necessarily the first, but one of the first things that will happen is that we'll shoot ideas back and forth that we don't agree on.
Yeah. Well, I mean, for me, the coming away from religion was probably an easier road than it was for you. Like I said earlier, I was not raised in a fundamentalist family. I was not pushed into going to church. But I still believed that there was a part of me that, you know, sometimes when life was hard or, you know, I didn't get the girlfriend I wanted or I didn't get the grades I wanted, I'd, you know, silently pray in my room hoping for a change, without having to put any real effort into it. And that's like literally how I looked at it, is that if I pray, it'll be easy. And I won't have to do anything.
That's right.
You know?
That's just a more honest way of you're more honest with yourself about why you're doing it.
Yeah, you know, like, I really don't want to do this. It's hard, so I'll pray and you'll make it easier.
Who gets Atlantis off the maps?
Who keeps the Martians under wraps? We do.
But what changed my life completely, and you're aware of this, was the passing of my sister. Yeah. She got herself cancer. You know, she didn't get it for herself. You go into Walmart, pick up some cancer. But she got cancer, and she died relatively young. And I laid down in bed beside her. I don't know if you know this, but I laid down in the bed that they had set up at my parents' house, and I watched her die. And as morbid as that sounds, as weird as that sounds to some people, because some people thought that it was kind of creepy that I did that, her eyes were open. And I just wanted to catch a glimpse of the other side.
Yeah.
You know, to know that she was okay and she was in a better place.
Yeah.
I didn't see anything. That cut deep for me at that age. Because it meant that everything she was gone except for what me and the rest of my family retained of her.
Yeah.
And that was pretty much, well, the beginning of the end for any faith that I had in my youth. And when I relate this story to people of faith, they tell me that I'm blaming God, that I'm angry at God, and that religion isn't the problem, God isn't the problem, He still believes in me. The usual catchphrases to try and get me to feel guilty for abandoning faith because it's not God's fault, it's
you're
mine.
You're just angry, you're blind.
Yes, exactly.
He was there to guide your loved one, and he still loves you, though you don't love him.
Yeah, exactly. It's the ultimate guilt trip to try and get you to reassess their point of view. And in many ways, I would have to agree. When she passed, me and my sister were very close, and I was angry, and I had to be angry at something. Because if I wasn't angry at something specific, then I was going to be angry with everyone else in my life. And I didn't want to take my anger out on my friends, or on my family, or on some random person on the street.
Yeah.
So I decided to focus my rage on a figment of my imagination. And for a long time, I was just anti-God. You know, it wasn't anti-religion, it wasn't anti-theist, it wasn't rational, it wasn't reasonable, it wasn't skeptical. I just hated God.
Yeah.
And in some way, I still clung to Him being real enough for at least a year or two after that event, that I could kind of channel that rage at Him. And I know it sounds crazy, but it was like I wanted Him to be real at that time, so that He could feel my wrath.
Oh, yeah, I don't get it from the same circumstances, but I do get it from what I went through.
Yeah. And eventually, after a while, it became a self-destructive rage.
Yeah.
Like if you let something boil over too long, it becomes problematic in other facets of your life. And where it became problematic is that anytime somebody would talk about how religion was good, I was just complete jerk about it. And eventually I had to refocus my efforts. So I started to kind of really analyze evidence and listen to arguments about, whether or not creation was real, or if Noah's flood ever happened, or if Muhammad was real, and if he ever flew to heaven on a flaming horse, and, whatever.
Yeah.
A whole bunch of different views, and I started reading different religious texts, trying to get a sampling of different faiths.
You're building your knowledge base, developing your intellectual framework for how you're going to process the world.
Exactly. And then eventually I just came to the conclusion after about probably 3 to 4 years after her passing that I was angry at nothing. I was angry that she was gone. That was the reality.
Yeah.
But my focused rage, what I had originally done to kind of help me heal, had now become a crutch. I actually, I guess in a strange way, I believed more strongly after she died. But it was the beginning of the end, her death. So that was what kind of eventually brought me towards recognizing the poison of faith.
Yeah.
It was a really, really odd time in my life, so it's kind of hard to summarize in one podcast, and I don't want to make it about my experience, but that was the generalized overview of my experience.
I don't, everyone's particular experiences are unique, but what you're going through is not something that other people have not experienced in some way.
Yeah.
Where you, like you say, you're talking about death. Death is a huge part of how people perceive things in life. For a lot of people who come out of religion, someone passing away or confronting, maybe an illness, confronting something to do with death is what really first time makes them challenge the stuff that they were given growing up, that they kind of just assumed to be true.
Yeah. And some people come out of this event, the death of a family member or loved one, and their faith is stronger. It's like the inverse. It can go both ways. Like you can either reinforce your faith and your belief in whatever particular God you believe in because of a tragic event, or you can fall away from it completely because it just flies in the face of what you believe is just in the universe.
Yeah.
And I think for me that was what happened to me, is that my family has kind of struggled. My mother had a tough childhood, and my dad had a tough childhood, and it softened them in a weird way. Like, they didn't become harder people for it. They became better people, more loving, more inclusive, and more forgiving. And it seemed that in a just universe, in a universe that is created by a benevolent being, my parents would have been rewarded for their own benevolence. They don't get in people's faces. They don't obstruct people's wants or wishes. They just wanted to exist and be happy.
And that's what's so offensive. What's this guy's name? Ray Comfort.
Oh, God.
Jerk-offs like him are so deeply offensive. The way they come at people who just want to understand science and look at the world for, like I say, through a practical lens. And for him, it's not even enough that a Christian be a Christian. They have to not believe in the core of science, which is evolution. So he's going to use the number one argument he uses all the time to shame people, especially anyone who still has a religious inkling. He shames them by saying, "Look how beautiful the universe is, and you can see God. And if you can't see God in the universe and know He's real, then the implication is clearly you're a bad person."
Yeah. You're a thieving, lying adulterer at heart, blah, 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 blah.
You confront guys like him, and you say, "My parents went through all this hard stuff. They became better people. They rose above it, and I felt that they deserved a better shake." How do you respond? He responds, "Well, who are you to say?" That's what they'll say. Who are you to say to God?
Yeah.
I'll tell you who I am. Go blow me, you little.
Well, I don't really know if I'd ask him to do that. Have you seen the beard? He looks a little rough.
Yeah, that's true.
But I don't know. It's wholly dishonest the way he comes at people. Like, he just he picks probably 60 or 70 people to be in his videos, like little clips of these college or university students. Some of them apparently biology majors, some of them physics majors. But how many interviews do you think he actually has to do to get those 2-second clips or those 10-second clips of people saying the most asinine things? Like people that if they were actually biology majors in a university, they'd never say that unless it was like just taken completely out of context, or they are just the dumbest kid on campus, like the D student on the first day.
Yep.
You know, and he's like, well, I don't want to take the cream of the crop, so he just tosses them out with the dishwater, and then he just picks out the lower percentile.
That's why I think it's important. First of all, if you're going to edit material, like I did in our first episode, I did a lot of it for comical effect, but also for the effect of placing things next to each other. However, I was true to myself. Whenever I do something like that, I'm true to myself that I am not taking and mangling what that person said just to make them say something they didn't say. And
quote mining, yeah.
Right. And to make sure that people know I'm not taking it out of context, I encourage people, follow the links I provide. The original content is right there. So you can decide, not based on what I'm telling you or what the other person would tell you, but for yourself, look at the original material or listen to the original. I think anyone who listens to the original material from the stuff I was dealing with in our last episode about Silverman, I think most people will come to the same conclusion. He seems to be having a meltdown.
Looks like I picked the wrong week to quit sniffing glue.
I don't quite understand where he's coming from, and to be honest, I don't care to. I mean, it almost seems like a lame horse. You know what I mean? Like he's just kicking around waiting for somebody to put a bullet in him. Like you just put him out of his misery because he's just... This is part of where I see atheism plus feminism and atheism, this whole problem that's been going on recently, flies in the face of an ideology. Atheists, skeptics, humanists, and all of the different colors of the rainbow that are contained therein.
Yeah.
We can't be contained. If we are true to our skeptic nature, then trying to put us into a rigid framework, making us an ideology, a singular movement with singular ideals, will fail. It'll fail because we are all strong-willed individuals who have already come out of a rigid structure. We've already come away from religion.
Yeah.
And some of us never had it, but, you know, a majority of us were former Christians or former Muslims or former different faiths, Hindus and so on. But because of that, it has become our nature to reject anything that tries to put us back into another rigid container.
One of the areas in skepticism I find that there is, in my opinion, there seems to be an area that needs a lot of growth. You know, we have a great deal about evolution, biology. There's a lot of different areas that are so strong. One area that seems to still need a lot of injection, or maybe just time for it to saturate, are the human behavioral sciences. Yeah, ideology is a universal human trait. We tend to do this over and over again. Groupthink. That's the way...
it's like a superorganism, almost.
Yeah, this is the way people like Hitchens would put it. It's called groupthink. Also, Doris Lessing, I've got a Massey lecture by her that she did in 87, I think it is. Okay. These brilliant minds often come to the same conclusion. And that's why we love them, is even if we don't understand what they're saying, they're trying to tell us. If it's political, if it's religious, west, east, up, down, you are going to have a tendency to think in a group herd, you know, a group mentality. Mm-hmm. And those are always going to cause you problems in the end. You need to be able to break away from the group you're in and think for yourself about the ideas that they're putting forward. And as soon as you do that, a person who says to me that I'm a feminist, and then they say, but I don't agree with the way Atheism Plus conducts itself, now we can have a discussion. Because Atheism Plus, whether it says it or not, in its mandate, its representatives all want to tell me what is or isn't moral. Right? Once you've told me that you're righteous and I'm not, unless I conform, where are we going to have a discussion here?
I'm sorry, but there has to be certain levels of moral flexibility in any group. Because if it becomes a rigid, this is right, this is wrong 100% of the time, then you are creating a de facto religious substitute for morality. I'm sorry, but no Atheism Plus, no feminist group, no vegan group, no political group is going to give me a list of 10 commandments that are not to some degree flexible.
Yeah.
If you make,
or at least open to debate.
Yeah, open to debate. Everything is open to debate.
Yeah.
Even if it's just for shits and giggles, I'll debate anything. I mean, I know a 20-year-old kid, he's a creationist, like hardcore. like Timmy Tarded, Timmy! He believes this shit through and through. Hardcore, he believes it. And no matter what I say to him, no matter how many different ways I explain to him why what he's telling me is incorrect, he refuses to budge. But it's debatable to him, and I find at least some level of entertainment in having the discussion with him. And I mean, if that's what religion or ideologies are here for, is for our entertainment, then, I mean, sure, let them exist for a little bit longer. I mean, what else am I doing with my time? But generally speaking, as a force of nature, as a force of human nature, anyway.
Yeah.
I think they need to be greatly reduced in the amount of respect that they are given.
Right.
Every ideology needs to have only a tentative level of respect based on its merits. So Atheism Plus, with this whole feminist angle, has very little merit backing it up. There's very little evidence backing up what they say. When it comes to the whole accusations of rape or harassment or anything that has caused this to become an issue, there's just so little merit to it that it doesn't warrant the respect that it's demanding.
Yeah.
I believe that every organization or every movement of people has to allow for change. It has to allow for emergent thinking. It has to allow for discourse when parties disagree. And as soon as you start censoring other people's comments or shouting down dissenting points of view, it's time to break ranks.
Yeah.
And splinter. And that's what's happening.
Yeah, and it doesn't mean, you listen, again, to bring him up, but he's not the only one. David Silverman, he talks a good talk about wanting unity. I don't see that in his behavior, but let's just say that is really an honest approach that he's taking. Unity at any cost is going to sacrifice the integrity of what you're trying to achieve. So we have breaking apart now, but that doesn't mean that the same group won't still hold. It just means that some of the ideas are going to be challenged. There's going to be an evolution in the social makeup of the group, of the way people are, interacting with each other and what we're doing with that group.
Yeah.
So, it could be a looser group, but it doesn't mean it's an ineffective group.
As far as David Silverman and people who follow his particular mode of thinking are concerned, the reason he wants unity is not altogether a bad reason. As a matter of political representation, atheists are very unlikely to get elected to office if they do so openly.
Yeah.
And we are a larger segment of the population in the States and Canada and around the world than we're given credit for.
Yeah.
And yet smaller religious groups can have greater lobbying power and they have louder voices. And I think what he wants to bring unity at any cost so that atheists can
be a bloc.
Be a bloc. We can be represented. The problem is that we're just not the same as other people. Yeah. I'm not saying we're better than them or anything like that, but we're too decentralized.
Yeah. Well, even when it comes to, say, you talk about Muslims in the Muslim country, Christians in the Christian country, they delude themselves into being unified for that purpose of trying to have a bloc movement, right?
Yeah.
The reality is the term Christian only became popularized like a century ago when they were trying to unify people politically. I mean, it existed before that, but it's only as powerful as it is now as a political term. And most Christians that use it, they don't even realize this anymore.
I don't even think it factors in for them.
But the reality is they all hate each other more than they hate us, except when we come to town and say, hey, could you not pray at our city council meetings or,
Yeah, we're infringing on your rights.
Yeah. And suddenly they're all saying that the other one's going to go to hell and blah, blah, blah. But then as soon as we come in and say something like that, hey, maybe we don't need a big cross in everyone's cemetery because we all share it. And, hey, let's all turn on this guy. He doesn't want a cross in the cemetery. He's obviously
Yeah. I don't understand it. Like, it just seems like right now at my kid's school, every year they have a Baptist church group come in, and after hours they rent space at the school to do a Bible club.
Yeah, you're telling me that.
They have their own church. And the people who go to this Bible club are already members of that church, or their kids are already members of that church.
Yeah.
But they put out little pamphlets.
Yeah.
Hey, why don't you invite your friends to come to this Bible class after school and get their parents to sign permission forms and whatnot. And when I approached the faculty about this, they said, oh, well, they rent the space and it was approved by the school board.
Yeah,
and
even though it's in violation of our Charter of Rights and Freedoms in this country.
See, now, I was kind of led to the impression that it wasn't against it because they were renting the space after school hours. The problem I have with it is that whether it's in violation or not, when you take children and you send them to a school, you're putting them in an environment meant for learning. That place becomes to their minds the representation of a place that is going to teach them things that are true.
Yeah.
Like factual. So, even if it's after hours, even if it's allowable, these kids are going into this Bible class at a school.
Where they're taught biology. Well, I guess at that age it'd be more reading and writing and math.
Yeah, reading, writing, math. Some sciences.
A little history.
Yeah.
But the authority figures are being transmuted, or they're being crossed lines so that they're in the same building. Yeah. Where they're learning the things that they can trust, and then they're learning the things that are a personal belief system in the same facility, in the same environment. And how is a child supposed to distinguish these things? On some level, it makes an impact. And I think you're right.
Yeah. Now, thankfully, I would think a majority of the children that are in there are already members of that particular ideology anyway. And I'm sorry, I don't mean to make it sound like it's a good thing. It's not. But I mean, I think that they're not spreading it as pervasively as they would like. I mean, if they had their way, they would get every kid in that school to come in and listen to this little course after class. So generally, those that are already, who are being infected, were already infected.
Yeah.
And the few stragglers that go in probably get bored after a few classes and then don't come back. Maybe one or two they'll get on board.
Yeah.
But I think it's poison to their minds anyway.
Well, okay, now speaking as somebody who grew up, religious background, everything that the community does to blur these lines contributes to my indoctrination. So my parents are teaching me because they were taught. And, my parents actually are progressive compared to their parents.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm progressive compared to them. It just so happens I'm progressive right out of religion.
Like a slingshot effect, eh?
That's
the gravitational force just slingshot you out of the...
But the amount of emotional turmoil and depression and everything I went through, some of that might have been unnecessary if the community simply took a neutral approach and said, like my church was in schools. We rented for years. Maybe if they hadn't done that, that would have helped alleviate a little bit of the mixing and confusion.
Yeah. Well, I agree, but I mean, I didn't really think about it as a kid growing up, but I said the Lord's Prayer in school every day.
Yeah.
Until I was in grade 8.
And God's still in our national anthem. In Canada, as opposed to the United States, I figured out why we might have a bigger problem, why the government doesn't want to remove those things.
Why?
Because we had liberal government for almost 20 years, pretty much. I think the reason is that we're still part of the Commonwealth. Technically, under our alliance, we still have a monarch, which is the Queen of England. The Queen of England, technically, is still the legal head of the Church of England. She is both a head of state and a head of church. So it is a violation for us to have her by our own constitution. And I don't think they want to get into that.
I mean, Canada as a country is pretty liberal anyway.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, you take our most religious wackos,
Yeah.
and you put them against the moderate religious wackos in the States, and then you go to the States and you get the real fundamentalist wackos. We got nothing. We got nothing compared to them down there. Every once in a while, you'll get that one individual who like blows you out of the water up here, like Venom Fang X. Wow. but they're rare here, and
or at least they keep it a little quieter.
Well, I don't know. If they stay quiet, then how wacko are they?
Yeah, I guess. Yeah. If they're polite, there's at least some common sense there.
Yeah, exactly.
But I think that this stuff is exactly where the stories I had last week. That is, it starts with a little bit of mixing between the state and the religion, and then when you can't separate them, like in Saudi Arabia and Iran, this is where you start having people getting persecuted, silenced, executed, tortured, because, well, how can they not do that? The state believes in the religion. The religion is a function of the state. So if you don't believe it, of course they're going to have to torture you. Of course they're going to have to kill you. What kind of good believers would they be if they didn't? So that's what I think the Christians I know, most Christians I know, believe in some level of church and state separation because they understand there's a contamination effect, and they honestly are not interested in torturing their fellow citizen if they don't conform to their way.
Yeah.
But I think they have some level of blindness that their fellow believers could one day do something so horrible. But it's human nature. If you don't question your beliefs and you're part of a groupthink, and the herd breaks to run and trample people, you're going to be trampling people.
Yeah, and it's much harder to stop a body in motion.
Yeah.
Once a movement is started, it's really difficult to slow it down, unless it fragments from the inside. And I think that's what a lot of people are seeing in the whole atheist movement right now, is that we were gaining a lot of momentum, and now we're breaking up upon re-entry. Like we're trying to land this ship and it's just falling apart. I don't see it that way. I see it more like a dandelion spreading its seeds to go plant elsewhere. Like evolution in a way, good ideas have a way of propagating more than bad ones.
Yeah.
So I think you're going to have this fragmented atheism plus and different ideologies trying to form out of this ever-expanding group of free thinkers.
Yeah.
Some of them more free than others. And the ones that tend to be more clear about their message, the ones that have the better ideas, the ones that have the clear way of thinking, I would hope will be the ones that continue to spread.
And it's like you say, there's a spectrum. There's you call it a rainbow.
Yeah.
Some, within the larger group of atheism, you have some people who are those freedom warriors. And I'll say, the group A Voice for Men, I made a video. I haven't done all the work. I haven't had time. But I made an initial video where there's a 4-minute rant. It's unedited of one of their podcasts. And I agree that men have concerns and there's a lot of issues going on socially for us that need to be addressed. But the 4-minute clip, it starts with them talking about a single mother. And these are guys that are on the list. These are mainstay guys at ABFM. Single mother calls the police because her son took a Pop-Tart out of the kitchen. Right? So that's weird. That's bizarre. I don't know the circumstances, but yeah, most people would just go, that was weird, or maybe laugh, or maybe go, that's stupid.
Mm-hmm.
These guys in 4 minutes start escalating into talking about how single mothers are going to get a feminist regime in power that's going to line everyone up and shoot them in the back of their head. And then they clarify no, I'm serious. I'm literally saying they're going to literally take over and they're going to shoot us all in the back of the head and line us up against the wall.
What? They were saying feminists were going to do this?
Yes. Because it all started because a single mother called the cops over something petty.
Well, what kind of monstrous butch lesbians do they think are going to line up all the men and shoot them? Like,
well, so they say men are feminists as well now, right? So it's non. Some of what their concerns are about might have validity, when you let it explode and just roll out of control like that. And I think that, in the video I put up pictures of union workers, because they're trashing the term freedom warriors or social warriors.
Mm-hmm.
So they're union workers. I put up a picture of people fighting for black rights during, in the 60s in the States.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I guess just universal rights is really what they're fighting for. And there's a place for this. There are so many important things these people do. The difference is that intentions aren't enough. Today's freedom warrior, if they're not willing to listen to new ideas and watch the changing landscape, can become tomorrow's tyrannical poke you in the eye and conform or else.
Oh, that would be me. I've been swimming in raw sewage. I love it. I love it!
I'm sorry I didn't come with a more formulated discussion for my first podcast.
Yeah, I think it was perfect.
Well, hopefully the audience, whoever they may be, will agree, because it's been kind of all over the place. But I think the most important thing for atheism as a movement is children, adults, the elderly, doesn't matter who you are, need to be taught more than anything critical thinking skills. If I had my way, that would be a class in public schools. It would be a class simply dedicated to the analyzing of evidence and claims.
Yeah.
And then teaching children how to take what is told to them and weigh that and use resources to search out the truth value of whatever they're being told. And I'm sure that some people can argue that they already do that to some extent in classes, but I'm talking a completely dedicated class just to critical thinking. Because if you teach a kid, grade 1, grade 2, kindergarten, critical thinking skills, they will never lose those.
That's right. Exactly.
But if you just teach them that, this is something that happened to me in school, which is why I know they don't teach it, right? Is I would do a math question, and I would come up with a different way to do the math question. We'd have the same answer. And I thought I was really good at math. It turned out I sucked at it, because the way I did it wasn't the way it was meant to be done.
Yeah.
Still had the same answer, the formula worked, but it was wrong.
Yeah.
And when I asked why, because that's how it's done.
Yeah.
That was the answer given to me. That's how it's done. So instead of giving me a good reason, I was simply meant to accept the established method, the established authority, conform. This is how it's done. Where I would have rather had been told that my method worked, but it was wrong because of this, and in this circumstance you would get the wrong answer. If they had explained to me why it was wrong, or if they had discovered that maybe I just figured out a new way to get to the answer, then knowledge would have been expanded.
Yep. I know with my wife and I don't know why she would think this when she wanted to have our daughter baptized in a Catholic church, a cathedral. I didn't argue. I just said, okay. I just made it clear. I don't believe any of this is real. I think it's all just magic talk. So I'm not going to challenge it. I don't think my daughter cares, and I don't believe it's going to do her any harm, so I'll allow it. And the priest was saying to me, "Are you sure? Like, you're not going to argue? You are an atheist, right?" I said, "Yeah." Yet, when I would lay this out, I said, I think that our daughter, she should be expected, if she's going to be in church or whatever, she should respect people, not causing disruptions in the church or fighting with other kids or being rude to people. That all still counts. But if she doesn't want to participate, say, in praying, then a child should be able already, once they're able to voice the word no, a child should be able to decide whether they want to actually participate in the ritual part on their own. And if a parent can't respect that's why I say I'm not anti-religious. You're pro-religious. You're pro your religious view, and you're pushing it. Whereas I don't mind you endorsing it. I would probably rather not, but I will allow you to endorse it. I will allow you to introduce it. But a child is a small person. They need to start determining what they want to participate in and not, to some extent.
Yeah, like when I was a child, I went to a Sunday school for a little bit.
Yeah.
My own personal choice. They offered cookies and ice cream, and I thought that was cool. But after a while, I found the content to be completely boring.
Come here, little boy. We have goodies
Yeah,
for
we
you.
have goodies. But, you know, eventually my parents let me chose to not do that anymore.
Yeah.
I think when a child is forced into a rigid regime of going to Sunday school or sitting in a church pew for a while, it just becomes programmed into them. Like they either retain it or they completely blank out and they go in the opposite direction.
Yeah.
As far as my family was concerned, I had all of my kids baptized. I didn't personally, like my wife did, and this served a dual function. One, to not do it would have caused a lot of argumentation amongst the wider family.
Yeah.
And just on the off chance that I'm wrong, I don't want my kids' fat being boiled down to make a warlock fly. So I figured I could cover my bases, right?
At least if the crazies take over, they can say, wait, I was baptized.
Exactly.
You can't kill me.
You can't boil my fat so that a warlock can fly. I'm good.
You can only torture me if I don't comply, but you can't kill me.
Yeah, exactly. But it's reaching the point in my family right now where my one son, more than the others, is starting to question the origins of things. And they love science. My boys are kind of like me. They love science. But one's more confused than the other because they're twins. The one just kind of accepts whatever I tell them is true, which is a problem for me because I want him to question.
You're his authority figure.
Yeah, I'm his authority figure, and I'm trying to get him to move away from that. I want him to ask me questions.
Yeah.
But the other one keeps asking me why Jesus made the world the way he did. And I'm like, what? Where are you hearing this?
Yeah.
And because I know it's not from his mother. And I know it's not from his grandparents. So it's somebody from school, but he refuses to tell me because I think he thinks I'm going to get mad at him.
Yeah.
You know, like he asked me, we were out camping and he walked into a thistle bush. You know, the little prickly plants that stick to everything.
Okay, yeah.
And he goes, why did Jesus make thistle bushes? And I'm like, what? I don't even know how to respond to that, you know, like, because I mean,
you know, they say kids like functional answers,
yeah,
since they're very young. I guess adults probably still do too. But why is such and such? Why, you know, give me the function. Or if you ask them a question, you know, if you see a rainbow, you're like, well, now why do you suppose that rainbow's so pretty? And they'll say, well, you know, something like, because a rainbow makes everyone happy after it rains. So they don't get too sad. Because, you know, there's got to be a function, right?
Yeah.
It would just be there.
Well, I'm still trying to get my boys are 8, going on 9. And we just recently, like, part of the reason why I wasn't here for the first episode, if anyone cares to know, so I had a house infested with fleas and a poor old cat that needed to be put down. So my kids are being introduced to death. Now, they've already had pets that have passed away, but the further back in time it goes, the less they remember about it. But this family pet's been with them since they were born.
Yeah.
And the one boy, he just doesn't understand. In the world of video games and instant gratification, where things respawn, you know, and get extra lives, you know, he's just curious when she's going to dig her way out of the hole and start walking around the house again.
Yeah. When's our reanimated cat coming back, Daddy?
Yeah. Trust me, that's a bad idea, son. I've seen Pet Sematary. You don't want to go there. But yeah, you know, this is the hard part, even for, I would think, secular parents, is that when it comes to a child, you want to shelter that child from the concept and the fear of their own demise. And even I have a hard time, you know, because I am strongly anti-religion, anti-established religion especially.
Yeah.
And I don't want my children to be a part of that or to be indoctrinated in that. But I am also, as a parent, driven to want to shield my children from the fear of the inevitable.
Yeah.
Because, to me, I accept my own oblivion. I know eventually I'm going to die, I'm going to be worm food, I'm going to cease to exist in the fashion that I do now, and everything that I know and have ever been will be gone.
Yeah.
And then only the people who are alive, who survive me, will remember me, and then when they're dead, their children are dead, and so on and so forth, I will be long forgotten. But that concept eludes my children. It frightens them.
Yeah.
You know.
And it frightens, it eludes many adults.
Yeah. And well, it does, but I mean, it's a balancing act for a lot of people.
There are still some things you can do to give them comfort up to a certain age.
Yeah. As
they're growing. Like, when my daughter first comes to me about death and wants to ask me about it, one of the things I can say to comfort her is, but you're very young and it's so long away, it's so long, you don't even have to worry about it. And that'll probably be enough for quite a few years.
I've done that. It's not enough for my boys anymore because now they understand that things die.
Yeah.
And they're
a thing.
And they're a thing. and eventually that thing is not going to be. And one of them makes very upset. The other one's just like, oh, that makes me sad. And then he picks up his DS and starts playing again. Like, I'm going to play Thor now. I don't want to think about this. And the other one, he broods.
Yeah.
And the one that broods is the one that was like me. Because when I was a kid, I was always thinking about this stuff.
Yeah.
And maybe that's part of the reason why I am the way I am today. There are just some kids you can tell are thinkers.
There's a guy named Lee Moore. He has a podcast. And every now and then I check in on his Facebook updates. He had one a couple weeks ago. And it was, do you guys ever worry about death? It's an open question. Do you ever think about death? And if it ever stresses you out, how do you deal with it? And there was a whole variety of answers on there. One of the things for me about when I had to come to grips with death, because for me I went from being an immortal, I was going to live forever in some existence, right? And I had an immortal being that was watching out for me, to one day all of a sudden I realized, I'm immortal and there's nothing out there. And I don't know what my purpose is. So that's quite a shift. But actually, for me, it was actually, I think, Richard Dawkins that really helped me find. I remember one day I was driving along in my truck, and I saw the sky, and I just remember feeling completely free. That, yes, I was going to die, but for some reason, in that moment, it didn't even matter. What mattered was I was free to be who I am, to live my life. It's a perspective shift, and sometimes it's harder than others. It takes time to figure out how to do it for yourself, like how it's going to work for you. But for me, I had to recognize the only reason I expected to live forever, like you're always going to not want to die. That's healthy.
Yeah.
But there's an expectation of immortality that to one extent or another, almost everyone's given. And that's instilled in us.
That goes back to that want for us to have our existence be special.
Right. But I'm just saying, if that was not instilled in you in the first place, like if you were a deer running around, you would never, I cannot imagine a deer thinking, I wonder if I'm going to live forever in eternity. It's not a concept that they know. Right?
They probably want to be Twitter-pated before they get shot.
Right. So we have these huge brains, and one of the things we've done is we've deluded ourselves with these things to comfort ourselves about the inevitable.
Yeah, that's kind of the price you pay for consciousness, right, is the understanding of your own mortality.
Yep.
Ignorance is bliss in a lot of ways, I suppose. The acceptance of death, though, I think it comes with age. I think it comes with understanding for some people, not all people. But I think it scares other people. Not that they understand that their own demise is coming, but when another person accepts that they are just going to no longer be, sometimes that acceptance frightens the observer.
Dude, bad news. You're dead. What? But I'm deaf. Sorry, dude. Super deaf. You're done.
Case in point, I had some Jehovah's Witnesses over at my house over the course of the summer. Very nice people. If you ever want any door-to-door religious organization to be a representation of what you want to be with your best foot forward, the Jehovah's Witnesses are awesome at picking the nicest of people, at least in my experience, to come to your door and present to you their propaganda, their ideology. The young lady and her newlywed husband that came into our house talked with me for hours, and they were very pleasant people. But they stopped coming by. And they stopped coming by after one particular conversation where I said, well, I'm an atheist. I don't mind talking to you. I mean, some of the stuff you're showing me is completely quote mined. Like, they gave me little booklets and pamphlets about how their religion is correct and the others are deceived and evolution is wrong, and here are these scientists that say evolution is wrong.
Yeah.
And I went through their booklet and I checked the sources, and it turned out that the main guy they kept quoting in all of these different segments of this booklet was a TV script writer. Like, he had no scientific training whatsoever. like he was like a B-movie script writer. You know, and
it's like a lot of these guys that talk about ancient civilizations.
Yeah.
They're not actually trained in the field of archaeology or anything.
Nothing. So I told them that. So then they brought me another pamphlet and another pamphlet and another pamphlet. And then I said, all right, I want to stop arguing with the science with you because, you know, as much as I know about it, I'm still a layman.
Yeah.
I don't have the expertise to claim any authority or a complete understanding of these fields, and neither do you. So it's like the blind leading the blind. You don't understand the science. I understand it only tentatively, so I'm not going to be able to convince you.
Yeah.
So let's argue the theological points. So then they were all good with that. So they started arguing with me these theological points. And I said, so as I understand it, Jehovah's Witnesses don't believe in a literal hell. And they're like, no, we don't. That's very impressive. We didn't know that you would know that. Most people think we believe in the pit of burning fire and pain and whatever.
How would you know that? It's something called research. What does that word mean?
Reading. But no, as it was presented to me by them, to clarify, they clarified some of my misconceptions. They believe that if you die not believing as they do, that you just cease to exist. That you are separated from God eternally, that you're just dead.
Yeah.
And I said, and when they finally clarified that for me, like the language specifically, you know, to make sure that I completely understood their version of hell was basically to never exist again, to be gone, forgotten, lost. I was like, oh, okay, well, I'm good with that. And both of them just had this wide-eyed look, like they were scared to death, and they're like, what?
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm good with that. Like, I'm an atheist, right? So I already believe I'm going to die and then cease to exist. So your worldview, I'm not going to get punished eternally. I'm not going to be tortured or burned or be told I'm a bad person in my afterlife for trillions and trillions and trillions and trillions of years in perpetuity until the end of existence. I'm fine, whatever. If your religion is right, then it doesn't even matter to me because I'll be just as dead under your belief as I am under my lack of one.
Listen, atheist, if you don't, you need to understand, according to our religion, if you die, nothing will happen. You'll just be dead. Okay.
Yeah, that was exactly it. And
we agree on this.
And they were floored. They couldn't believe it. They thought, even as an atheist, that I expected some sort of continuance of my consciousness.
Do you know, I think I asked this earlier, do you know integral math? Jessica, you may have run into it, right?
Yeah.
I heard him on somebody's podcast, and like I say, he can be really sharp with people, but he's got a brilliant mind, and when he's relaxed, he's very good in conversation. And I forget who he's talking to, but they said something to the effect of, maybe there's something we need to figure out how to offer people something, like to make atheism seem more appealing to them. Maybe we haven't done that, for believers. And what they have is something with instant appeal, and we don't have that appeal. And I loved his answer. It's exactly what I think. Skepticism and atheism and reason are its own reward. You cannot tempt people over with something to have that. That is the reward. Religion gives you all these things, like you're going to live forever, you're going to have this invisible buddy with to protect you. Well, but when it comes to reason, the gift is you are now no longer deluded, and you can live your life seeing life as it is.
Reason, critical thinking. I'm not going to say that science and atheism are interchangeable, because they're not.
Yeah.
But generally, generally, if you are a highly educated, scientifically minded, critical thinker, evidentialist, whatever you are, you're going to tend to be less religious.
Yeah.
Tend to. And it's kind of funny. If you look at different technologies and medical science advances coming out, it is not inconceivable that sometime in the next 100, 200 years, if the human species is lucky enough to last that long, that we may not figure out a literal immortality, but such an extended life, a way to transfer your consciousness. These are the different levels of transhumanism, that eventually the offers of religion will be also offered by science.
Or they'll be realized in a practical way.
Yeah.
Like, they'll be seen as... one of the things I think people forget, even a lot of people who are into science, is that they talk about our future as if we'll still be like we are now. One day in that future, those descendants of ours are going to look back at us like we do our common ancestor with apes.
Look at those Homo sapiens walking on 2 feet. Why did they not evolve hover nodes?
Because our ancestors at one point went, look, fire is brilliant. And they probably weren't even saying it that clearly to each other.
Yeah. Well,
so there's going to be a fundamental shift in what we are, not just the things we have available to us. Our technology, our environment, the way we behave will change who we are. So maybe one day maybe not immortality, but maybe our ancestors, our descendants will live, say, and they'll eventually live 500 years.
Not to get too off base, because I mean, this conversation has been all over the place. So I feel really, really bad for the person who listens to this conversation, and they're like, "Holy fuck, where are they going with all of this?" Because they're all over the board. But generally speaking, I wonder if ancient man, just as a thought experiment for myself, were as scared of the technology of their day as we are of the technology of the old cavemen sitting around going, "Oh, this fire, it's going to ruin society. It's going to burn things and blah, blah, blah." Or this, what do you mean? You throw your spears. You don't shoot them out of a bow.
And so those who adapt, right?
Yeah.
By the way, that's my philosophy that I've narrowed it down. Adapt. When things are tough for me and I feel like crap, every now and then I'll just stop and think, adapt. In other words, stop worrying about how impossible or painful it is. That's life, adapt. That's what's going to be tomorrow's good day. Right?
Yeah. But see, I think fear of technology, fear of advancement, fear of change.
Yes.
Is what drives a lot of people into tradition.
Like the Borg is an idea that even now it seems more and more outdated the more you see it. Even now.
Oh yeah.
Can you imagine in 200 years them looking at an old file and going, "What is this supposed to be? Why are these people wearing metal and gadgets all over them?"
Yeah.
As they're seeing it through their interconnected mind brain or something.
Yeah. some sort of internet brain.
And one of the interesting things that I found out recently, I was listening to somebody who's an actual expert on this sort of thing. I don't follow our evolution track as closely as a biologist would, but there are new things they discover all the time, right? That shed more light and more specificity. So one of the things that they've been questioning recently, I don't know if you've heard about this, is the humans, our direct human ancestors versus the Neanderthal, who was always treated like part of the chain.
Yeah.
But now they see them as existing at the same time. And there was some interbreeding. But the Neanderthal went extinct as the Ice Age receded.
Yeah.
So it's interesting, they have actually shown in Europe now with their research that the human-sized people who were smaller, more agile, but not as big and strong, gained the advantage as the weather changed and slaughtered the Neanderthal as they moved through Europe. And these are the types of things that I find them interesting, and it helps me think to the future of what could be in store for us instead of slaughter, and what the idea of change and how much things will change and how important it is for us to not to forget our past, but to use it as a perspective as we move forward and not be hung up on it. Like you say, not changing.
It's weird. It's the first time, not literally, but I mean, the Homo sapiens, I think, are the first human species that doesn't have another human species existing with them at the same time any longer.
Yeah, we're kind of selfish.
Yeah, it's our planet. And then we have to go and be racist to the other different subtle differences. It's strange. We do treat each other so differently, and we really shouldn't.
Yeah.
Because we're genetically almost indistinguishable.
And there could be changes going on right now that will be an offshoot down the road. But
Yeah, I'm all for mutant hybrid powers.
Yeah.
I want to shoot laser beams out of my eyes.
yeah, I'm not so happy about the idea of other people having those powers, but myself, I'm all for that.
Oh, I'd be a naughty god. I'd be. No, I'm kidding. I would be benevolent and not abuse that at all.
Get that finger out of your ear. You don't know where that finger's been.
Yeah, when you were talking about when we're going through the stuff about death, one of the things that I don't know if a lot of people thought of, this fixation on evolution is one, but it's usually connected with pro-life. This massive pro-life movement within the religious groups like Christianity.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I have, since leaving Christianity, I slowly became pro-choice. I'm not the type of person that brings them up, but I am sometimes drafted into them. So I have tried to understand what was it and what is it for other people that creates that mindset. Why is it so pivotal? And what they would say clearly is that it's life. It's created a conception. But really, at that point, it doesn't feel anything. It doesn't think anything. And usually for me, I say the argument is about when we define it as a human life, not, at conception, but at what point.
Don't take my word on it, but I remember hearing somewhere, so that this is kind of not something I'm prone to usually doing. But isn't there some area in the Jewish Torah that describes when a baby actually becomes a baby, like they consider it water for the first few weeks?
Yeah, well, there's just so much in the Old Testament, especially, but in the Bible, they draft these references like David is writing a poem. It's supposedly David. Sure, it wasn't really him, but let's say it was David writing a poem in Psalms, and he says, "While I was still in the womb, you knew me." It's like, you know what? Do we take poems from people now and use their creative license as a literal statement? That doesn't make any sense. But I think the reason it's so important that conception be the moment of life to them is because it's a reflection on their own fears about dying.
So just to read it here, most often in Jewish sacred literature, a fetus in the womb is considered a human life under construction. The soul is usually described as arriving when the first breath of life is taken at birth. The primary Jewish imagery for the beginning of life comes from Genesis 1:2, where breath hovers above the waters of the earth before life emerges from that cosmic womb. Then in Genesis 2:7, after the body of Adam is fashioned from the clay of the earth, God is described as breathing life into him. These stories frame the basis for the Jewish view that the fetus gains full human rights and status only once the baby's head has emerged from the birth canal. So I know that Christians generally don't consider themselves Jewish.
Yes.
But let's be honest.
That is the origin of their scriptures.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's kind of funny. They say that Jesus changed everything when he came, even though Jesus said he didn't come to change the rules, but to fulfill them, or something to that effect. I'm sorry, I don't have my Gideons right here.
Do you want to know, for me, intellectually, what actually occurred in my mind that was the final blow against the existence of God?
What's that?
God, first of all, I knew was useless if he's not Almighty God. If you're going to have a God who is just basically the universe, then it's the universe. This is indistinguishable if he's not a personality, right? So here it goes. The thought occurred to me, because I had been dealing with someone who was talking about being molested as a child repeatedly. If God exists, God was, he was essentially being all present or all powerful. He was there. He's there with every child that's being molested. He is there when that's happening and does nothing.
But he moves in mysterious ways.
Yes.
That's what you're forgetting.
That's about as mysterious as it gets.
Yeah.
And so, when you say this to someone, they will immediately deflect. But the reality is, according to your own interpretations that you have stated over and over again about your God, whether you're Muslim, whether you're Christian, he is all-powerful. So is he either not all-powerful, or does he not care? Because it's got to be one or the other. And the Bible has this fallback. When Christians can't explain things, like fundamentalist Christians, they'll say, well, the Bible says that it pleases the Lord. then who are you to question it? Oh, okay, so let's use that answer for this situation. So my first Twitter was my name with at God is Satan. So I realized it is the same being in the mythology with one. It's God wearing a mask. Look, I'm the devil. Look, I'm your savior. Look, I'm the devil. Same being.
You think that they would generally be the same?
I think they're just two sides of the same coin, yeah. They're interconnected. You can't have in the mythology of God, in Christianity, any of these religions, you cannot have the good without the evil. Yeah. They'll say God is apart from evil. How does that make any sense? Is he apart from us? Isn't he still active in the world? It doesn't make any sense.
Well, I mean, this whole podcast, I think, is going to be every group of atheist friends' garage conversation that's ever happened. That's how structured it is. It's got more substance to it than Atheist Plus, but
just barely.
Just barely. The next show we'll have to come up with something a little bit more structured.
This is just our first get together for this.
No doubt. I don't know. It's just strange to me how people just don't see it for what it is.
Yeah.
Bullshit. I literally had the same creationist kid tell me flat out that I was using unfair, confusing language to make him doubt.
Oh, yeah.
And I thought I was being fairly clear to him because I asked him a simple question of free will versus God's omnipotence. See, for me, if God is all-knowing and every choice is part of his plan, then if you have an abortion or you're gay or you're this or you're a murderer, he already knew this.
Yeah.
And he set that plan into motion the moment he said, go.
Yeah.
And when I said this, oh no, but you still have a choice. Well, how did I ever have a choice? Well, God gave you free will. Yeah, but God has a plan.
The reality is that people were arguing the same shit with the ancient Greek philosophers. They were coming up against the same thing. You can find it in their writings. People would come up to them and say, like, the story of Socrates really is by Plato. I don't know if he was a real person or not, but definitely Plato wrote all this stuff. So either with this guy Socrates or with Plato, he walked up and people would say, what you're saying is against our traditions and you're teaching people against God. You know, that's a crime. Like, wow, that sounds familiar. Meanwhile, these days we paint the Greeks as being these real liberal hippies. But there are consequences if you went against the tradition. You know, their tradition was just a little different. A lot of the same questions. Where is God versus where are the gods?
Yeah.
Is something, the one I love from the story of Socrates, he says to a priest, you know, I'm not as pious as you are, and you probably know more than us. Can you inform me? Now, you say this man went and did something that was not pious. Is something good because the gods say it is? Or do the gods say it is good because it already is good? Of course, there's no answer for that, right? It's a circle.
Yeah, well.
Which is why he asked the question.
Yeah.
There's no good way to answer that.
Well, there's not. But you ever seen what happens when you corner a badger?
Yeah.
Boy, when you ask them a question they can't answer, do they ever get pissed off?
Yeah. Well, I think in the end, we serve our purpose. We agitate people. Sometimes, you know, atheists or skeptics, we push too hard at the wrong time. But
well, when is it the wrong time to push?
Well, I mean, like I've decided to back off on Facebook and in my own anything that's like a really personal engagement. I won't be as harsh as I would say on our show.
Yeah. Well, kind of the ability to be anonymous adds a layer of defense.
Yeah, it's not because I'm treating people stupid or with pity. It's because they're my friends or family or whatever, and I'm trying to be sociable. There's a time and a place. But if someone comes up to me, let's say I'm at a wedding, at somebody's wedding, and someone does come up to me, and they for some reason start picking at me, or trying to push me around or something like that. They provoke it. It's not that I won't come out and say something. It's just that it has to be provoked in those occasions.
For me, let's say it was a special event like that and somebody's trying to provoke me. Certain traditions I still kind of cling to. I think every person who takes breath on this earth has some social norm, some traditional paradigm that they operate under.
Yeah.
If I'm at a wedding, that is not the time to be having this discussion. Because if it gets heated, as I've known to do, I have to know my cues. If you're starting to agitate me at a social function that is for somebody else, I'm going to avoid that conversation. Then I'll say, you know what? If you want to have this discussion with me, let's do it in a more easygoing environment, less about them and more about our discussion.
Something that will make the bride cry.
Exactly.
You ruined everything. But the same thing for skepticism. If someone's sitting next to you at the table at the reception and they start talking about how we're all going to get autism if we keep getting inoculated or whatever, you're going to be tempted to say something, but you might end up getting into a huge fight because to them that's a deep held belief.
Oh yeah. Well, it's like aspartame causing migraines or something like that. I've heard every number of different points of view. Yeah. You just got to avoid them until it's in the right environment.
The way I usually test whether there's some hope for a conversation is when somebody makes a claim to me. For instance, the one that's bothering me the most right now, even though it's a little more petty, is the diet fad of gluten-free. Gluten-free. People have bad reactions to gluten. All right, so I've looked into this. I've listened to other people talk about it. There are a few specific and rare things like allergies or conditions you can have where you have an immediate bad reaction to gluten.
Yeah.
But for the vast majority of us, that is not what's happening. The fact is you're getting rid of muffins, donuts, cookies. They're all going out of your diet. That's why you're losing weight, and that's why you're feeling better. But, you look, and I've tried looking. I cannot find any research on this. So if someone says this to me, and I really want to end the conversation quickly, I'll go, that's fascinating. I'd really like to know more. What scientific journal did you get that out of? What research did you look into? And what institution was it done in within? And when they say, well, I don't know, I just know it's out there, I'll be like, then you know nothing. You know nothing.
Just because we have chiseled abs and stunning features, it doesn't mean that we too can't not die in a freak gasoline fight accident.
Aside from teaching critical thinking, so people need to learn how to be more skeptical, to be critical thinkers, to seek out their evidence. There is another side of this coin. It is not solely the responsibility of the general public to learn how to be critical thinkers. Science is already complex.
Yeah.
They do themselves no favors by making their information difficult to understand or hard to find. Yeah. There are certain research papers that I've read the brief overviews of, and then I seek for more. I look for the expanded version of this. I look for the literal journal on it, like the whole paper, and it is bitch to find.
Yeah.
Unless you have access to some university websites or some obscure blog that nobody's ever heard of, you hardly ever have the chance to find any of these.
There is some good news on that front.
Oh yeah.
There is a motion it's in work now. They're moving towards changing it so that the reason they block it all off is because if you want access, you need to pay a fee, right? So the research is handed in for free. Then if you want to access it, you have to pay a fee, or your university has to pay a fee, and that's how they generate their funds. The way it's going to be switching over to now, from what I understand, is that the researchers have to pay the fee, and then it will be accessible to anyone who wants to get in and get that information.
Oh man, I hope so, because it's kind of unfair to demand that somebody does research on something to back up their claims.
Yeah.
If they have no access to the information to back up their claims. So, that's part of the problem. is that people really don't know how to use these resources if they are available, and if they're not available, it's not fair that they're not available, because then you're asking them to do the impossible.
Yep.
You know, and that's no different than asking a theist to prove the existence of God. You're asking them to prove the impossible.
Yeah.
Or the highly improbable, anyway. I hope that everybody listening enjoyed the conversation.
And from now on, when we get together, we'll probably do shooting back and forth some stories.
Yeah.
Conversational topics.
Maybe try and get some people on and do some interviews.
Or just chat with people.
Just chat with people.
Alrighty.
Alright. Good to hear.
This is Apostasy Now.
Well, the Lord has given and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. How you gonna bless God and you just took your wife? Now that's the dumbest thing in the world.